A man listens to recordings of nonsensical conversations, periodically measuring the temperature of his head, which is steadily rising. Once it reaches 40 degrees, he turns off the recordings and cools his head with a wet towel. Semantic virus. Contagious madness, which is transmitted through speech, is characterized by the infected person beginning to talk nonsense. Then visions and insanity comes. With its emergence, the world was in crisis, panic reigned. No one could invent a cure, and the antivirus administration only tightened the screws. And soon they announced the creation of safe zones in cities. People were obliged to wear headphones, and those who disagreed were seized even at home. Riots began to break out. And then the anti-epidemic institution took over. The world changed, and so did the main character, Murat Siyavuz, who for some reason turned out to be immune to the virus. One day, Murat sees a girl with a book at the bus stop. When he goes further, he notices a flower pierced through the asphalt. And for some reason, he decides to warn the stranger that buses have not been running here for a long time. But she says nothing in response. When Murat arrives at his house, the first thing he does is check the signal at the gate. A green herringbone. All is well, the way is open. He enters the house and hands his mother the Sudoku he got for her. And he throws out a reference book and learns the name of a powerful flower, the Byzantine snowdrop. But then it turns out that the man forgot to buy soap, so he goes to the store, along the way solving one of the Sudokus in a few seconds, causing his mother's wrath. He passes the bus stop again and suddenly sees a note where the girl waiting for the bus that won't come confesses that she knows about it. After looking at the flower once more, Murat walks on. He turns his attention to the mother and her children, and then the woman standing nearby starts talking nonsense. Panic ensues. The salesman pulls down the protective curtain, leaving behind the infected woman, Murat, and one of the boys. Realizing the danger, Murat puts his headphones on the kid and somehow pushes him out, while he takes the soap and ice cream and runs out the back door. His head explodes with pain, and he cools it down with an ice cream cone. When he comes to, he pulls a hood over his head and hurries away. AEI agents arrive at the store. Their boss, Anton, learns of the strange man's behavior and orders a search for him, while Murat returns home and sees a hallucination of a man who laughs at him. But it soon comes to an end. Meanwhile, Anton arrives home, the walls of which are covered with articles and clippings about Project X. It turns out that its developers were gauging the level of chatter and trying to create a cure, but it ended in a fire. Some became chatterers, but many died. Only the linguist Murat Siyavuz could not be found. At this time, his mother asks Murat to go to his aunt's tomorrow. He needs his help there. In the morning, Anton goes to the office, but in order to get in, he has to go through voice control. Enraged at the malfunction, he finally gets into the building. He is shown the video footage from the scene and orders to check the headphones the man gave the kid. Meanwhile, Murat and his mother arrive at his aunt's house. It turns out that she's concerned about his son's behavior, who sometimes starts shouting strange words loudly, which attracts the attention of the neighbors. Once upon a time, Murat and his friend Ozgur helped the man. But then Ozgur died. Could Murat be the only one who could do it again? At this moment, the man shouts loudly, to which his son comes running. The boy is sure Ozgur is alive because his body was not found after the fire. He has already set up a meeting with the man who can help in the search for the scientists, and will do so. To prove this, he hands Murat a tablet with an imprint of the funnel pattern, which was Ozgur's signature. Murat comes in excited. Ozgur is the only one who can cool his head. Later, the guard tells Murat that the AEI agents came by and he will no longer put up the signal Christmas trees. Murat reminds his mother of the dead plant pot. Then he looks at family photos and tries on an engagement ring. He recalls how he used to motivate them to find a cure once at the very beginning of the epidemic, Ozgur, and then his wife was there, fooling around, writing down her thoughts. Murat decides it's time to act, writes a note, an invitation, and leaves it at the bus stop. At this time, Anton is informed that Murat has often been in the hospital after the fire, and the reason was always the same: a high head temperature while the body was not warm. When he arrives at work, the agent looks at the video with the thermal imager, and everywhere else, Murat's head is just on fire. Murat and his nephew, meanwhile, arrange to be given access to the AEI archives to review the fire case. And at the department, an expert finds a serial number on the headphones, which is used to figure out the owner. Anton realizes that the man's head heats up when he hears the chatter, but the disease goes no further, which means he's immune. At this moment, Murat walks inside the office while Anton listens to his boss Fazil speak about the opening of a new laboratory and the fight against the +1 opposition group. After waiting for the end, Anton asks to speak about Project X, but the chief refuses to talk about it. Annoyed, Anton leaves. But when his assistants give him Murat's address, Anton rushes to the suspect's house despite the ban. Meanwhile, Murat goes to the archives and finds the dead Ozgur's file. He checks his case file and sees the records from the store, which cannot be deleted. The AEI cars rush to Murat's house. A search begins, but Murat's mother calmly answers questions while his son discovers trampled snowdrops. His mother, at the same time, manages to hang a red Christmas tree on the window, which is a signal for Murat. Murat sees it and turns back. Despite the pursuit, the man breaks away from the chase and goes to his buddy, Dr. Artem. Anton notices the herringbone, but the woman excuses herself with a broken hood. The officer orders Murat to retrieve his belongings. After waiting for the AEI to leave, the mother retrieves her son's notebook from the dead flower. Meanwhile, Fazil learns that Anton has conducted a search of Murat's house. Anton himself secretly makes his way to the quarantine zone, where he continues to live in spite of the ban. Murat then arrives at the salon where the artist did the Ozgur's tattoo. Now, this drawing is repeated on pills, which can only be taken in Zone 6. The man goes to see Dr. Artem, and the latter tries to reassure the man. It's not his fault his wife died, for she killed herself by picking up the chatter. In the meantime, Anton listens to Murat's tapes and finds his work reports, thanks to which he cannot become a plapper. But his boss again forbids him from pursuing the case, although he orders his assistant Jenna to find evidence that Murat is not immune. Murat asks for help with the pass to Zone 6, but it costs a lot. Meanwhile, his mother receives the long-awaited notice in the form of a posted poster and realizes where to find her son. Anton orders a photo of Murat to be posted to search for him, and guesses that the prescription found in Murat's house is signed by Dr. Artem. His mother finds Murat at his aunt's house, and he shares plans to infiltrate Zone 6. In the evening, Murat's family listens to an appeal from the +1 organization, who recall the brutally suppressed uprising and urge them to continue the fight against the AEI. Anton continues his search and looks through the archival work of Murat's lab, but suddenly discovers a ban on admission. Meanwhile, finding out about the lack of money, Murat's mother gives him her medallion. It is only under these conditions that he manages to get a pass to Zone 6. The AEI agents who arrive on a tip-off do not find Murat, and Fazil, remembering the night of the fire, asks someone to meet him. After returning home, Anton puts homemade candles on a cake and goes to the basement of his house, where he hides his wife and son, sick with chatter. But they do not understand the man. In the meantime, Murat enters the subway and sees pictures of himself everywhere. He begins to panic and turns back around, drawing the guard's attention to him. But suddenly, the girl from the bus stop grabs his hand and kisses him. From there, they walk together, and Murat is literally soaring with happiness. The girl takes him to Zone 6, and Murat sees Istanbul and the sea for the first time in a long time. He thanks her for saving him and asks for her help in finding his friend. The girl introduces herself, Shule, meaning fire, torch, and confesses that she is from +1 and has been trying to attract him for a long time. This frightens the man, and he leaves. Shule runs after him. The +1s are looking for a cure, and they need his help. She writes on his hand how she can be found. The girl goes to the secret place of the +1s, where she meets Murat's nephew. She informs him that a man with her address on his hand has been following her and asks him to find him. Murat at this time enters his apartment, which he hasn't been in for years. His memory takes him back to a time when his wife was alive, and he promised to take her away from her illness. As he falls asleep, he sees his bloodied wife on a treadmill and wakes up startled. Meanwhile, Fazil goes to meet an unknown man and tells him about Murat, who in the meantime is abducted from the street by unknown men. Jenna warns Anton about turning the case over to her, while Shule visits her dead boyfriend's grandmother. She recalls an evening broadcast dedicated to his memory. Murat is taken to the +1 bunker, where he is intercepted by Shule. She apologizes for this delivery and promises to help find out who makes the blue pills. The girl invites him to the radio, and he listens to her stories about a friend who died during the uprising. Then, during the protest, the AEI opened fire and killed many. But plus the former believe in a cure and do everything they can to make one. In the meantime, Anton finds Dr. Ertem and demands the release of Murat. Meanwhile, Murat tells Shule about his overheated brain and about Ozgura. Anton sneaks into his house without noticing that someone is following him. He goes to his family and finds his son with a wound on his face. As he rushes around the kitchen, he does not notice that he is perfectly visible from the street. The man treats the wound, and when he comes back upstairs, he notices a shadow at the entrance. He goes into the courtyard but does not notice Jenna lurking by the door. Shule asks questions, and Murat demonstrates to her the effect of the plappers on his temperature. He pretends to be infected, which scares the girl, but realizing it is a practical joke, she laughs. In the morning, she brings a group of researchers to Murat, but he refuses the pointless work. He only agrees after she promises to help find Ozgur. The two finally find out the address of the main supplier of substances in the zone, and they go to him. But once they enter, they find a lover of recording his voice on antique equipment. The bandit is annoyed by their arrival, but after Murat shows his knowledge of sound recording, he becomes amiable and agrees to answer questions. But then Yasemin, who sells substances, walks in, and in response to Murat's questions, the bandit points after her. It's her friend who makes those pills. Murat and Yasemin run after the girl, but she's already on the move, having managed to show the blue pill as a goodbye. Murat again falls into his visions, where he is surrounded by a giant brain, which the man sets on fire and sees many connecting threads. At this time, Jenna reports back about the surveillance of Anton, which she says yielded nothing. Anton, on the other hand, asks his friend for help in finding Murat and reports on the surveillance of his house. Meanwhile, Shule leads Murat to the house where all the scientists of the Plus One live. The owner suggests that the man play with the machine they used to train the monkeys. You have to look at the numbers scattered chaotically across the screen and then press them one by one. And while he's explaining the rules, Murat is already up to the task, much to the scientists' amazement. Shule and Murat go to the market to buy tapes for Murat's recorder. Suddenly, Yasemin appears before them. She puzzles Murat with logical riddles, which he instantly answers. Satisfied, the girl gives him a telephone number, to which she will send further instructions. At the same time, Fazil's assistant learns that Anton is being sent on a mission and will be gone for a couple of hours. Later, the man teases Anton about Jenna's interest in him. And by the way, she has the same whitewash mark on her shoulder as Anton himself. And the man orders her to turn around while she makes her way to the officer's house. After looking around the house and picking up some cassettes from Anton's desk, she goes down to the basement and finds Anton's wife and son. Immediately, she feels the barrel of a gun at her head. And there is a rift in the ranks of the Plus One. The Winghawks group demands that AEI respond with war, while the supporters urge, first of all, to find a cure and save the sick, whom the authorities treat terribly. At this time, Murat's phone rings, and he and Shule go to a new address together. Jenna begs for mercy, especially since she now knows his secret and is not going to give it away. It turns out that they once had a relationship, but she didn't know about his family. She sympathizes with the man with all her soul and is ready to help in the search for Murat. And the officer recalls how at the beginning of the epidemic he commanded raids when the military took away the infected, beating their loved ones. He then shares his findings with Jenna. Murat wrote at the beginning of the epidemic that Chatterbox could be cured, but the AEI classified all this work because they didn't want to lose power, and then the lab burned down. Meanwhile, Shule and Murat arrive at the right address. Yasemin calls Murat and riddles him with the new task. He handles it easily and is directed to the location of the safe and an encrypted password, which he also quickly unravels. But inside is a piece of paper with an incomprehensible set of numbers that leaves the two stumped. Anton tells Jenna how he once caught his wife crying at home, covering his son's mouth with duct tape. And when the son couldn't understand that it was his birthday and he was just hitting the cake with his hands, the woman couldn't stand it and took off her headphones. And now he's ready to kill anyone to keep his loved ones at home. Murat, meanwhile, is trying to figure out the mysterious numbers and tells Shule that his abilities came after Ozgur's treatments when Murat's head began to overheat. This is a side effect. And then he suddenly realizes that he is holding a ferry schedule. The two drive to an old ferry where the man who appears demands that they undress and carefully checks them for bugs, and then leads them to the car. But suddenly, Shule is dragged outside and Murat goes on his way alone. At this time, Jenna reports to Fazil that she was at Anton's house and asks for permission to participate in the search for Murat, as the linguist is clearly involved in Project X. But Fazil orders her to forget about the conversation. Later, he catches up with her in the parking lot and asks her to listen to an interesting recording, actually infecting her with the chatter. Murat is brought to the Chatterbox maze, where people bet on the winner who manages to find a way out and not get infected. Yasmin admits that he is in the labyrinth, and he will either find the girl or just go to Asgur. Murat jumps into the maze. He looks for Shule, trying to protect himself from the chattering around him, but eventually he loses consciousness. The last thing he sees are the faces of Shule and Ozgur, who praise Murat for choosing the maze. And this is the end of episode 4.